There was empires in Africa called Kush, Timbuktu, where every race came to get books. My success to you, even if you wish me the opposite. Sooner or later, we'll all see who the prophet is.
Namaste and welcome to another edition of Flash Drive. Today we're going to be speaking to the Bashesh about the African origins of Easter. Welcome, Bashesh.
Thank you for having me again.
No problem. You're welcome. What does Easter mean and where does it come from?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Well, when we say Easter, right, first of all, the word Easter, the English word, they'll say austere or astor, and it implies the festival of life. But this symbolism, especially coming from a Christian background, right, they'll call it the Passover, because if you go back to the book of Acts or the New Testament, the word Easter was never originally found there. It was actually considered the Passover, right? When we as Christians refer to the Last Supper, it was the Last Supper, meaning the last time he sat, this Christ figure, this Jesus, with all of his disciples. But it was actually the Jewish Passover. And when I say Jewish, I'm using what they say today. And this Passover happens at a time of year where they're bringing in the vernal equinox, bringing in what they're calling spring. So when you ask the question, what does Easter mean? By definition, the word implies the renewal of life, the vernal equinox, coming into a new cycle. That's what it implies. Now, what it has been made to become a holiday and rolling of the stone and nailing of someone to a cross, that's when other people got their hands on it and it began to change. But there's a reason even that they did that. They weren't so smart to actually create Easter. They were just taking what you had as melanin people, rewriting it from a European perspective to give Europe a place in history.
Okay, thank you. The resurrection concept, can you tell me where it takes its roots from?
Okay, well, let's just look at the story of the resurrection, right? Because this is what Easter is supposed to be based on. The resurrection story. Resurrection means to resurrect, to raise up, to rise up, to be almost revived, if you will. So this concept that we read in the Bible they say that Jesus was buried, and after 3 days and 3 nights, the stone was rolled away, and Mary Magdalene and Martha and women, 2 women, some places it says a group of women, some places it says Mary by herself, and in other verses in what they call the synoptic gospels, there's only Mary and Martha, right? And that this Martha, Mary washed Jesus' feet with her hair, or came to anoint his body. And I'm saying all of these different pieces in order to show to the viewers, your viewers that are watching, what exactly was taking place. And they said that this Mary and Martha had a brother. And their brother's name was Lazarus. And Lazarus was also bound hand and foot and had been dead X amount of days. And the Lord Jesus Christ came and he called Lazarus forth. And Lazarus came forth from the dead. Elijah the Tishbite did a similar thing. But in the case of Lazarus, when we say the word Lazarus, we're saying the word Azar, Nazareth, Lazarus, the Nazir, the Nazarites. So this was in reality a Nazarite event. Jesus of Nazareth. A Nazarite event that speaks to the resurrection, but not the bringing back from physical death. Right? Because in hospitals that happens every day. A person flatlines and they say we've lost them. And they take out and they clear and they put an electrical shock to the person. So that person's been brought back from the dead, technically. But in fact, it is understanding that according to the ancient Nazarites, such as Samson, if you will, from the Bible, these ancient people, the original resurrection took place over 10,500 years ago. In the original story of a divine family, and this divine family was called Osiris by the Greeks, Isis by the Greeks, and Horus by the Greeks, which we knew as Asaru, Aset, and Haru. These were principles, universal principles, that we understood represent coming to the earth. So as the Asaru or Osiris, his name means the watchers, the seeing one, the observant ones. So the Asaru principle, the Nazarene principle, was the watchers coming down and being born on earth. By the time we get to 2,000 years ago, with the birth of this Christ child, this melanin Christ child, he represents a divine being coming to the earth, so much so that the wise men had to watch the stars to be able to calculate location, longitude, latitude, and who was to be born. Asaru, according to the story, was put to death. And in being put to death, was chopped up into 14 pieces. These 14 pieces were then scattered, and his wife and her sister, Isis, Aset, the throne, and Nephthys, she who was the divine woman of the Hut, the great zodiac, the great Dendera, the astrological or cosmological system, they had to come find these missing pieces, put him back together, because he would not be able to rest in the next world if he was not given a proper burial. So, the same story. By the time we get to the New Testament, where history is repeating itself, we see a similar event where Mary Magdalene and Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea and Martha of Magdalene, because that was her sister, right? They're coming to anoint and prepare this body and actually wrap this body like the ancient African system of mummification, if you will, because the whole shroud of turban concept of wrapping this individual, that's not a Jewish way of getting buried. You can go to any Jewish funeral parlor and you don't see them wrapping a person in this binding wrapping. That's only African, there's only Egyptian, there's only Ghanaian or Ashanti, there's only KwaZulu. We wrap you bit by bit, or even cremation in certain instances. So in the case of the resurrection, the first resurrection was the first Nazarene, or the first Asarian, or the first Nazarene or Nazarite, or Asarian or Ansarian, the first aider of the Most High, the first one that we'd say the original sacrificial shepherd, Asaru. Out of this shepherd Asaru would be born a son who symbolizes the divine on high coming to earth, Haru. And this divine that comes to earth then comes, by the time we get to Jesus, when Jesus is gone, the divine spirit comes to his disciple called John the Beloved, and he receives the spirit to take the message. This was all African cosmology, African theology, if you will, that's found on the Memphite theology called the Shabaka stone. And that was the original resurrection. And the sisters were always involved, whether it's Mary and Martha, or whether it's Sarah and Hagar, or whether it's Fatima and Aisha in Islam, or whether it's Labuda and Akhlina in the case of Cain and Abel. Because remember, Cain and Abel, even their story was the story of a divine being being put to death by a brother who represents the devil. Because Cain's name means javelin or pitchfork, and he puts Abel, the father of the divine, to death. And then there's a replacement called Seth given in place of Abel. Like there was a replacement called Haru given in place of Osiris, or a replacement called John the Beloved given in place of Yeshua. So this symbol with the females, these matriarchs, right? You all were able to resurrect. Today they say a nation can rise no higher than its female. That's what it's saying. Because you are the first teachers of us all. So the female was always involved in resurrection. You go to most hospitals. Who's really running the hospital as far as saving lives on a day-to-day basis? The nurses. The doctors come in and read charts and write a few things and step in when really, really needed. But the day-to-day running of the hospital is done by the females, by the nurses. They know oftentimes more about the patient's condition than the doctor, because they're more hands-on. Doctor looks in the room, reads the chart, talks to you for a little bit and leaves. Nurse comes in, draws your blood, takes your weight, your blood pressure, does everything for you. So there's a connection, and that was the ancient Ptolemaic system. And at that time in ancient Africa, we even had females, mostly the first females who were doctors. This is found at the British Museum, and it's called the Kahun Papyrus, Kahun, and it speaks of the original physicians that all European doctors studied. What's it called? Queen's College. You have here at Queen's College? Queen's College has a whole exhibit. When you go in there, they have a whole exhibit on the Kahun Papyrus, where they speak of the original doctors were females who were masters at revival. In Kemet, this resurrection, they draw it as Aset, as a bird called a kite, K-I-T-E, and she's flapping her wings over the nose and mouth of Osiris to give him life, because these ancient females understood what you today would refer to as CPR. You follow? X amount of breaths to X amount of pushes or compressions on the body. This was our way, and will be again, if we can just get our people to want to know more than what they know. Don't believe anything we're saying. Use that internet and try to seek it out.
I didn't even know they had an exhibition at the...
Yeah, the Queen's College is called the Kahun Papyrus. Okay. The British Museum has the papyrus, but Queen's College here in London has done a whole study on it, because they're one of the medical schools for nurses and midwives. And the Kahun Papyrus is also known as the gynecological papyrus, because it speaks about birth and giving birth and how it's done and how to check the dilation of the female. It's there.
It's amazing. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Shesh, can you tell me about the symbolism of being washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Okay, now being washed in the blood of the Lamb, again, this is another principle that many people think is a European concept as far as their translation of the Bible. And this whole being washed in the blood, that Christ's blood is what redeems us. But yet in the Bible, in the New Testament, it says that we are all heirs to the throne of God. When we as ancient people of Ptolemaic, with the blood that we were concerned with is your bloodline. You are washed in the blood of the Lamb, because the original Lamb, as far as 2,000 years ago, if you will, was called Yeshua in the Hebrew. And this Yeshua traces his roots to the root of the name Yeshua. Yah in the Shemitic languages is O. In the Semitic languages is life, like Adam, lifeblood, right? The name Adam means lifeblood. The Bible says that Christ is the second Adam, so he's the second lifeblood. But Adam didn't give his physical blood. Adam gave his blood through the woman's seed, Eve's bloodline. Today they call that bloodline the mitochondrial DNA. Being washed in the blood of the Lamb means having the blood of the family line of Yeshua, of the family line of Ishmael and Israel and Midiani, the original 3 groups of 12 royal tribes and families that the Greeks and the Romans, on one of our previous discussions, you and I think you invited us a while back, and we came on and we were discussing about the Romans and the Greeks and how they stole our identity. Yeah. They did things like stealing the concept of being washed in the blood. The blood is the bloodline. Not someone literally cutting someone, but you not being tied into that bloodline. The book of Ezra speaks about that. And when they stole this identity, they gave us names like dynasty. They gave us names like temple. We as ancient people didn't have temples. We didn't speak Latin. We would have never used the word templus. We had assemblies. We had kanisa, which they call churches today. We had universities or universities, cities where we studied the universe. We had our own things. We didn't have dynasties. Dynasties is Greek. Dionysos is a Greek god. We weren't speaking Greek, so we would have never called ourselves dynasties. The dynasties, in fact, came out of Europa. But in order to culturally diffuse, if you will, or culturally put themselves into a culture that was not theirs, to lay claim to it, they had to steal pieces of Africa. And so there's an Africa in Judaism. There's an African piece of the puzzle in Islam. There's an African piece of the puzzle in Christianity and in Hinduism and Taoism and in architecture and in music, how they reverse the musical notes. All of these things were taking place. And this leads us to where we are in a position of not knowing. You follow? Yeah. So the goal has to be to get people to want to know again. If not, we will be looking at the Bible. We'll be looking at Christianity or Islam or Judaism, we'll be looking at Easter and we won't see that the Africa's right there because someone's taking that piece of the puzzle, hidden it right in plain sight. Most of these things that we're discussing are right in plain sight.
Right.
It's just being able to be inspired enough to do the homework to find it. Because the internet's there. The British Museum is there. The British Library is there. Leipzig Museum, the Louvre in France, they're there. You can go. You can walk in. They're free. They make them free. But we don't even go. You follow? Because if they made it where you had a reason to go, it would unlock something. They call those things that are held there artifacts. Facts of art. Facts of art that come from melanin societies that would speak to your greatness. And they can't afford to have that happen. And unfortunately, that's the day and time we're in. If we work, we can do better, and we have to, for the sake of the next generation.
When I think of Easter, eggs, Easter eggs are very popular, they come to mind, and also the Easter bunny. Can you tell me how that ties in?
Of course. Well, Easter, the only cultures that identified egg birth is Kemet, it's Axum, Ethiopia, Punt, Nubia, Niger Delta, Indus River, melanin cultures. Because every female sheds an egg. They say Re or Ra comes out of the primordial egg. So this whole concept of an egg is African. Every creature on earth is born out of an egg. Whether it's the egg coming out and hardening with oxygen hitting it, and then the mother or father having to sit on it and keeping it warm, whether from penguins to robins, or from the female once a month, one of the eggs, when the lining sheds, he drops one of those eggs to be fertilized. There's egg birth in all creatures on earth. And this is an ancient Tamarian symbol. But the problem they're having is that they admit to egg birth, though they have children chasing these different colored eggs, representing the different aspects of nature. But if they admit it, they would know all of the creatures that lay eggs are the females. There's no male frog laying an egg. Even among certain species of frogs, where the male has the ability to alter its gender into female, it still must turn into a female. And nature only does it when there's no females around to allow that species to survive. But that's one of few species that can do such. But in most instances, always the female supplies the egg. So the Easter, which was Esther in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the book of Esther, same ritual. Esther, or Easter, we called it Astir. And Astir or Astar was a name of Aset. The Sumerians called her Ishtar. Ishu, the Hebrew word for female, star, because she was a female star, or one who gave intellect or light to her people, matriarchal society. So Ishtar then becomes, in the Bible, Esther. And Esther is living in what land? She's living in the land of the king named Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, the land that you call Persia today. Persia is the original land that you call today Iran. Iran is the name Aryan, where the subjugation of females began, the Aryan doctrine. So they were now stuck with these pieces that spoke to the African cosmological order or the African theology, but now they would have to hide it. The rabbit that you asked about, there's a rabbit called Wenenet. Wenenet is one of the ancient Tamarian ancestors or guardians or angels who wears the mask of a rabbit. And you can go online, Wenenet. Wenenet. And she wears it. They actually carve her on the wall, wearing a rabbit's mask with a female's body. That was her mascot, because she was the ones that the Kahun Papyrus speaks about, the gynecological systems of birth and procreation and how it works and the inner anatomy of the female. The female's womb is a replica of the womb of the heavens, the dome of the heavens, the universe. The same thing that takes place with stars exploding and suns being birthed and moons and planets happens in the womb between male and female, when copulation and ejaculation and fertilization is taking place. Microcosm, macrocosm. As above, so below. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. This was our original ways. If we can teach, imagine teaching children these realities. What would it do for their minds? How many more doctors and engineers and people into cinematography, how many more professional people would we breed if our children were able to identify with greatness? See, greatness induces or brings about greatness. If all you're taught is slavery, there's people who believe our history didn't begin until slavery. There's black people believe that slavery benefited Africa. You follow? And that's okay. They have a right to believe that, and we have a right to show them better. Right? Show them better. It's not that they're believing it because they know and choose to believe. They just don't know. They have no idea as to the greatness. So the rabbit, that's Tamarine. The egg, that's the female. Cannot escape it. Cannot escape it. May not like it. There's those listening into this program that they'll say, oh, that show, flash drive, it's very controversial, or gotkushTV. You know, they're always putting different speakers and different people, and they're saying that they can dislike it, but they can't disprove it. You follow? And we're saying to people, forget what we like, let's deal with what we need. No one likes medicine. You follow? When grandma and grandpa gave you that castor oil or that what's the other one they used to give us when we were kids? You know, these nasty, oh my goodness. It's horrible, horrible, but it was good for us. So the truth, the realities that we must bring to the world, they're bitter. Because they go against everything we've been taught. We've been taught that but we gotta have this brainwashed. So many people are afraid of being brainwashed. So many people don't realize when we say brainwashing, it means you're admitting the brain's dirty. But you and I were taught brainwash means that the brain is clean and someone's trying to dirty it. As opposed to we've been dirty by someone else's information or doctrine, and now our brains are dirty with a bunch of filth and lies and misinformation.
Barshesh, can you tell me when Easter actually takes place, please?
Well, Easter, to the original European Christian doctrine, Easter happened every year in and around March 21st, March 22nd, the vernal equinox. Some even said March 20th. So anywhere from the 20th of March to the 22nd of March was considered the vernal equinox, spring, as you call it today. Winter, spring, summer, fall. So spring season was supposed to represent rebirth. New flowers, new plants, new bees, new animals, new people, for that matter, because most creatures in nature reproduce based off of the feeding cycle. So if you were giving birth, which the ancient matriarchs understood, if you're giving birth, it would make sense to give birth during a time of year when nature is abundant with food. You follow? Giving birth in the dead of winter, and you had to live off the land, didn't really work out. So that's when Easter originally was, but it again was taken out of the Passover. And being out of the Passover, the ancient, what they're calling Passover, when the so-called Jews of today do the Passover, which we call, they say Pesach. We say Pesach Shalom. Pesach Shalom. And it was a ritual, and one of the things on the Passover tray is an egg. You follow this? There's things placed on that Passover tray or plate, and each of these things represent an aspect of nature and its interaction with us. And so we had three rituals in Tamarine. We had Pesach Shalom, which began at the vernal equinox, March 22nd for us. We had what they call Festival of Aset, or Aset Fasha, and then we had what was called Austere. Resurrection Day, modern, what they have Easter each year. Now Easter's all the way in April somewhere, right? The beginning of April. Aset Fasha, because Aset or Isis and Neptune were the two sisters responsible for the resurrection. So there's a day to recognize the importance of the female in this process of the resurrection of the Nazarene, and more importantly, the resurrection of we, the Nubians, today. They're called the Gene Isis. And then Pesach Shalom was the actual ritual where they get the Last Supper from, the breaking of the bread, the drinking of the wine, but the wine was the symbolic blood of the mitochondrial DNA of the mother.
Thank you. Can you tell me about the biblical characters that are related to the term Easter?
Yes, in the Bible, and we mentioned a little earlier in this program, in the Bible, when they speak of biblical characters, let's just take the Cain and Abel story again. Okay. Cain's name means javelin in Hebrew, Cain. Abel's name means keeper of sheep. Now, Judaism teaches a baby or a boy, a child, a girl is named in 8 days. Why would the parents name him javelin? Adam named all the animals in the garden. So why would he name one son Javelin and one son Keeper of Sheep? Doesn't make sense. Right? Not at the day you were born, or 8 days. In fact, these were schools, because remember, Cain and Abel had a sacrifice that they were both told to make. And this sacrifice, they said, Cain, the keeper of vegetation, his sacrifice was not accepted. The meal he prepared was not accepted. And Abel sacrificed sheep. The meal he prepared was accepted. In Tamaré, that biblical event becomes Osiris and Seth, 2 brothers of the same family line. One the protector of the night, Seth, one the protector of the day, Asar. They weren't really rivals. It's a symbolism speaking to the nature of human beings. And in the story in the Bible, Cain, the oldest son, is replaced by the youngest son. In Kemet, or in Aksum, in Africa, Tamaré, the oldest son was killed off by the youngest son. The youngest son, the Satuk, he kills Asaru. The Bible writers take it and flip it. The oldest son kills the younger. The ancient story, Osiris is the god of vegetation. Cain is the god of, or the child who's doing it with vegetation. Vegetation, a vegetarian diet at that time, or highly abundant in vegetables, not that they only ate vegetables, was more conducive. When abundant meat eaters came to play, they made vegetation considered no good. Cain's offering is not accepted, and meat is considered good. But this Asaru held 2 things in his hand, the rod and the scepter. The rod in Europe becomes known as the diviner's rod, a rod that's used to find water. It's a certain type of metal, and they used to have it in Europe and Africa, different places, and you would use it, and when you would get near where water is flowing, it would draw the water. They call it a diviner's rod. So Asaru's diviner's rod is necessary, as all great farmers at that time understood. You had to be able to find water, a source of water near the surface, to be able to dig your well, to be able to irrigate your plants. So he represented vegetation, and then the crook, they call it, the crook and flail, that crook is the shepherd's rod. So he represented being the good shepherd of the sheep, human beings, and of the land. And so that becomes the symbol of both of them in one. This was our spiritual practice. The Cain and Abel story is, in fact, out of the line of them. Not that Cain and Abel didn't happen, but the original Cain and Abel was Osiris and Satuk, or Seth. And out of their bloodline came this way of which we keep retelling it. If I go amongst the Yoruba, they have a way of talking about the 2 twins, Urugu. If I go in South America, they have the 2 twins. Everywhere you go, there's these 2 twins rivaling. Even Europe, rather, they call it Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. 2 twins that were at each other, and one killed off the other. The Cain and Abel story. But when the Bible writers are writing their Cain and Abel story today and translating it today, they're adding Romulus and Remus in there. They're adding someone else's concept.
Wow, thank you. I've never looked at it that way at all. Is there any record of Easter in ancient Africa in terms of, I know we've covered a broad spectrum, but is there anything else that relates more to what we're doing, to what they're doing today as well?
Well, again, all of the aspects, from the Easter bunny to the Easter egg, to the rolling the stone away. They don't tell you that King Tut, he was a Yeshua, or the Savior for our people at that time, in and around 2,000 years ago. And if you go to Tut's tomb in Kemet today, when you're on your way into his tomb to visit, for anyone who has the pleasure to go to Egypt and see it, when you go into Tut's tomb, they have this big circular stone rolled to the side of it. But they're not telling us that that's everyone's thinking Jerusalem, Golgotha, the Church of the Nazarene, when in fact, this was talking again, a story that keeps repeating itself of a divine female who gives her life and a divine male who gives his life in different cultures. If we speak to the people in Burma today, right, they have a sacrificial female, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's considered one of the people who's fighting for the liberation of their people from being ruled by military rule. That's self-sacrifice, because she was under house arrest for about 10 years, and before that, for another 10, 15 years, she was imprisoned. So she's self-sacrificing. Every culture acknowledges this. But again, if melanin people give up our culture and only embrace European dogma, then we don't see that. We don't see how important that is for each generation. As much as we praise Garvey and we praise Noble Drew Ali and Elijah Muhammad and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and all those greats that have gone on before us, it is also as important to have living, visible, viable ancestors still living amongst us. Tangible, to show us the way, to give us the way of linking and tying back into who we are, what we are, from where we've come.
Thank you. Can you tell me what roles females should play in this holiday? Okay,
well, the mother plays, in all ancient African holidays, the mother holds the principal role. In the case of Fisak Shemo, let's say, which is the Atonement Passover, besides the preparation of the meal that the family would do, there's prayers that's said, or supplications, true prayers, that are said to invoke the remembrance, because all of these rituals are about remembering your past in order to activate this present and guarantee the success of the future. So when we have these meals, the female represents that spine, that backbone. She represents that essence, because Ishtar for the ancient Kushite Babylonians, or Aset for the ancient African, same culture, right? Or Shinbu for the ancient Japanese, right? The Lady of the Mountain in China. All of them acknowledge that the female represents the awakening. She stimulates the awakening in the children, in the family. She's normally the first to rise, the last to set. So in our symbolic teachings, she represents in Fisak Shemon, the Atonement Passover. I can't speak for the Jewish Passover, though I understand what they do, but you have to have them explain why they do it the way they do it. We understand it came from us. So the way in which we observe it, the mother's principle. But when patriarchal doctrines grab it, everything's based on father. The father's going to lead the prayer. The father's the head of the household. The father, the father, the father. Let mom get sick and we'll find out who's really in charge. Let mom not be available. Any man out there knows if you're left with that baby, how difficult it can be if that baby's nursing and mom just went to the corner to get some whatever from the store. It's a long journey while we're waiting for her to return. So the mother holds a principal role in not only the preparation of the meal, but in the prayers that must be said, which she leads, and then the father follows suit and does his part. It's in Kemet and Tamade, there was no females first, suppress man. See, no, it wasn't that reverse. It was females first, but both energies are needed. Right. The feminine polarity is first, but it is counterbalanced by the masculine. One is receptive, one is repulsive, or to repulse, or to push away. But both of those energies are needed in our people, in our houses, in our lives, in our relationships, if we are to succeed. Because we've been trying to do it the patriarchal way, and it's not working. And that would thereby tell us that if we try to do it a flipped patriarchal, matriarchal way, where women just dominate and tell men shut up and all that, we're not going to win that way. It takes everyone working together. And that's what these festivals, Fisak Shemo, Christmas, all of these different festivals, that's what they represent.
So the festivals that you're talking about, they seem very family orientated.
That's right. So, without family, we're nothing.
So is what you're teaching about, is it about us bringing the families back together?
Forcing families to have to sit down and look at each other and talk to each other, because without family, we are nothing. Any of us who've ever been single, it's a hard road. Not so much as if we just want to party and go out, okay, but at some point in life, most people, not everybody, most people get to a point where you say, is this it? I go to work, I get paid, I go rave, I wake up next to someone I don't know, oh well, and I do it again, and I do it again, and I do it again. The programming of us all is at some point to procreate. Every species, food, clothing, or food, shelter, and reproduction. Yeah. Every species is based off of those base necessities, right? Food, clothing, shelter, or warmth, or reproduction in reality. Every species is trying to reproduce the next generation. And for us to do that, family has to be the pinnacle. Family has to be the foundation. Family is where it's at. If we don't ensure that these rituals, and they're festive, they're not just sitting at a table, there's laughing, there's joking, there's singing, there's dancing, but it's being done in a controlled environment that guarantees respect, guarantees appreciation, guarantees love, and makes, children, how many of us as children, those of us that are older like myself, how many of us remember mom and dad actually holding hands and saying, I love you? Most of us don't have that memory. And if we don't have that memory, then we don't know how to establish that in our own families. So if we recognize that we never saw mom and dad hugging and saying, I love you, we never saw mom and dad having a meal, a romantic meal, or we say Africantic, right, meal together, then it's very difficult for us to do that for our children. And if we recognize that, then our true religious identity says, this is something that our identity requires. And if it doesn't exist, then we must create it for the sake of our children, so they won't suffer from that imbalancement that many of us suffer from today.
Thank you very much. Just before we finish up this interview, I just wanted to find out, you have children.
Yes.
How do you celebrate Austere or Easter in your home?
When we do the festival of Austere, that is a festival where the mothers and the daughters, we dress, or they dress, not we, right? They dress up, and we have what some people call libation, grape juice, right? And there's Easter eggs as you have it. We take eggs, because this is a festival that goes back 10,500 years. And these eggs are painted, and we hide them in the backyard and all around the property that we have. And the children go out with their baskets, but they've been given the understanding of what they're doing and how this ritual symbolizes the mother giving rebirth, and that the importance of gene superiority, the importance of genetics, the importance of choosing the right type of spouse, the importance of the egg, the mitochondrial DNA. The children are taught this, and then they go out, they gather their eggs, and then they discuss why the eggs have the shape. And then there's a lesson in it, though there's a lot of fun in it. Yeah. And then we do fun things with backgammon and cards and chess and football and softball and netball and what we call basketball. And we have all of these things to make the whole day about an event that the children had so much fun that they can't wait to do it the next year. So their culture is being ingrained, but in a fun way that makes them want to keep doing it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I hope to do that with my family.
All right.
Next time. Well, thank you for coming to see us on Flash Drive again, and I hope to be able to interview you again real soon. Well,
thank you. We thank gotkushTV and Flash Drive, as far as this program and programs like it, for allowing people like myself and other great teachers and ladies and gentlemen that are out there trying to do something towards the liberation of our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
There was empires in Africa called Kush, Timbuktu, where every race came to get books. My success to you, even if you wish me the opposite. Sooner or later we'll all see who the prophet is.